going to, again, this is not a Bible study. It's a class on discipleship. And so this is part of why that you, and we were talking about how the enemy is not as calm when you start talking about discipleship. Yeah. Because you're moving away from religion into a relationship. And the devil doesn't care about religion, quite honestly. They're helping him, in that, okay? First evidence of that, but it's very subtle. Adam and Eve in the garden, and you look at the Hebrew translations, it's Adonai, Elohim, you get into these other names of God, but it's the Lord our God. You see a lot of the translations, the Lord our God. When Eve went there to the garden and was talking to the enemy, he just said, "Did God say?" He believes in God, but you'll never hear him say Lord about God. You find out later in the New Testament, that's how you test a spirit. An unclean spirit can't say Jesus is Lord. So with that, that's how you test them. Now we'll get into some of that later, but the scriptures lay out a very good approach when you run into all these different situations and how to recognize it off little bitty telltale comments, lack of comments, situations, things the Lord's letting filter through to show us different things. And so that's all part of what we're going to be looking to pick up on, learning to pick up on, I should say. Okay, now, y'all can copy this? No, I'm teasing. There's a lot here on the board. I tried to get copies made, and we're in Panama, and I didn't check them, and so they're very light, in that. And so from that standpoint, please use a pen or something to darken the areas that may not be very clear because of the copies and so forth. On that, feel free to do that, but that will save you some of this to follow later, here. So, on where we're going to start, and some of this is going to look like, I fully understand, it's going to look like a review for a lot of people, but you'll see it transfers in moving along here into something most people haven't heard or used to or applied, okay? And so, we're using the First Testament because it's the roots of so many good examples of an understanding. The First Testament uses natural events to point to future spiritual understandings, experiences, and patterns. Patterns are very big in the Scripture, but they're almost never talked about. Okay? We touched on one of them last time, and that was when Eve ate of the apple. She was deceived, the Scriptures say. But it also says Adam was not deceived, but he ate anyway. That cost him. He wasn't in trouble when it was just Eve. Okay? Because the sin from doing that, disobeying God, was death, according to God. Well, what happened, because he's sitting there going, okay, how much do I love my wife?
He went with happy wife, happy life.
Well, you could say he kind of invented it, but it's at a whole nother level because he was setting a pattern up,
yes,
actually, that Jesus followed. Where was Jesus' bride? On earth.
On earth, right.
So if Jesus wanted to go get his bride, he took off his deity. Several places in the Scripture his position hadn't changed as Son of God. That's where that authority always comes in. But he had to take off all his vesture, his power, his whatever, and become man. That gets into the study of the kinsman redeemer, which is in the First Testament. Again, another pattern and laws and so forth set up. Kinsman redeemer. If you had somebody coming and attacking and doing harm to your family, and it killed somebody or something like that, if there was a kinsman out there, he could come and kill whoever did the harm to those people or do the same type thing to them. There was a law. He could do that. He didn't have to ask anybody or whatever if he was a kinsman. Okay? He had the authority to do that. There's several other books. I don't want to derail that it goes into with it, where even one guy had to hand another one his shoe for the authority he passed over, because he wasn't going to redeem it, and he gave his shoe to another one so he could go redeem.
I've never even heard the term.
So see, that's just part of, what would you say, my unhappiness with some of the stuff around not being taught, because you miss the depth. This was started, so much was started of the spiritual, was started back in the natural, because that's all the people could understand. Otherwise, you're trying to do hand puppets, on stuff. And so, trying to do that with the spiritual is a challenge, okay? Because they understood at that time a little bit about spirits, and certainly the enemy. But their enemy was real. They didn't have to imagine the Hittites, Amalekites, etc. These people were there. So, and they were their enemy. They were just trying to kill them. You're going, well, what happened? Didn't have to happen. That's what the Amalekites and all the other ites were there to do.
We're there to do
To kill any of the
unclean spirits.
of the believers, if you will.
The believers.
The believers. Now, they were in the natural, but this gets into the spiritual application, coming in, okay? From that. So now, starting again in the way of review, kind of a review for us, when the chosen people, which were the Hebrews, we didn't have a Jew yet, but the Hebrews were in Egypt. They had went in as a family, and they came out as a nation type thing. That's another term and stuff that goes on. But they were in Egypt. Egypt was the main power of the world at that time. So they were in the world. They were slaves. Hello, they were slaves to the Egyptians. It's like the pressure of fitting in to the world, fitting in with your friends, fitting into all these other things that are actually distractions.
Yeah.
Okay? So they were in the world, but they were there as slaves. What that was pointing out, being in the world, they were slaves to sin. Not being with God. Not following God, not doing all the stuff that some of them knew from Moses.
Can I ask a question
Sure.
to clarify?
Sure.
But during this time, there was no Jewishness, right?
Correct. The first Abraham was the first Jew
Right.
to be called that. They were still the chosen people.
Right, but they were Israel as a group. Is that right?
As you and I would say that, yes.
Okay.
But Israel hadn't come about yet until they
Right.
left.
But they were not the nation of Israel, they were the people.
They were the people that were going to become Israel.
Right.
Good
Thanks.
question.
Yeah.
I want to be.
Get it all sorted out.
Yeah, because I realize, and I apologize. It's part of my frustration that some of the other places that people have gone to Sunday school, to Bible studies, or whatever, they completely skip over this. They jump to the New Testament, give you a bunch of nice sayings, and say, "Oh, isn't that nice?" And here's one or two Aramaic words or what that means or something, and they're done. And I'm going, did it change anybody? Probably not. See, and that's not good.
You got to go deeper to get the real meaning.
a little bit, or at least have an understanding. And you can't bring an understanding with you if you were never given that understanding. Like that pattern of, okay, Jesus going, my bride's down on earth. But because of all the power of God, etc., yeah, I'm going to bring her back. She's not identified yet to others around, okay? But I'm going to go down there, and I'm going to enable her to come back up here and be with me forever. Probably same type idea. Okay, Adam, I don't know, looking at Eve going, I don't know where you're going, but I'm going to follow you. This type thing. And disobeyed God. See, difference with the second Adam, he didn't disobey God. They'd made a decision that that's the only way this is going to work.
True alliance. Yes.
So, for all that. So, that was kind of, but see, it's a pattern that you don't hear taught about the connection. They just say, oh, he messed up. Well, no, there was method behind it. Did you have something?
Well, I do. I know it struck me head again a little bit, but this whole thing with Jesus coming down and becoming fully man. Mm-hmm. I know we've been through this before, but
yeah,
fully man. So therefore, as fully man, he could be killed. He could be whatever.
Correct.
Right.
Except for God filtering and some other things we could get into later.
Yeah, because everything we've been taught is fully God. Fully man, fully God.
Right.
And I know because he's part of the Trinity, that part's true. But then how can he just be fully man at the same time?
It gets into
It's the difference between.
Well, seriously, it's an issue.
Yeah, and it's well, peace.
It's a big issue. And one we can just pretend to go by, but
we're not pretending to go by it.
I'm not saying, but it's one of these things. A lot of we end up just shaking our head. Okay, fine, but we don't really get it. Well,
I don't
think I'm alone.
No, I don't get it either.
I can see the nods all over the place.
I think it has to do with faith and trust. But if there's more to it than that, then
could be a whole Bible study in itself. Okay, of going through, and you'd have to pick up the aspects of the law and the Jews on how fervently and ridiculously accurate they tried to keep the law. This gets into many places in the scripture that are not brought out. That when the law said this, that was it. When it said south, it meant south. So you find when the Hebrew people are camping around the tent of meeting, the tabernacle, there were no of the thousands that were there were none on the southeast, southwest, northeast, and northwest. There were none. Why? Because the law said you're going to go to the south, you're going to go to the east, you're going to go to the west, you're going to go to the north. And they took that type. Okay? So when you get up to the teachings on a kinsman redeemer, Jesus wasn't half angel. If he wasn't fully man in a physical sense, didn't say spiritual, didn't say positional. That's where the God comes in part. But he had to be a physical man to be a kinsman to die for us. And the Jews, there's no argument with them on that. It's a closed case. If he hadn't been fully man, he couldn't have died for us. If he was, well, you're part God. Okay, are we part God? And we're made in his image. Are we part God? See, you start getting at that. Then he's not a kinsman. See, or we're not. We're not a kinsman. Well, we're not a kinsman. If you're half angel.
Which I am. Duh.
I knew that.
Thank you.
Your husband told you. I know. But I'm sorry, you can pull those back. I'm sorry. Just pull the slide them if you can, or we tie them up, it'd be better. Thank you, dear. There you go. He'll figure it out. But that's what I said. Huh?
If I'm part angel, then we're going to explain where I'm going.
Then, if you're part angel, then Jesus didn't die for you, according to the Jews.
according to the Jews.
Okay, like the real Jews or like the Pharisees?
The law. The law. The law says, doesn't matter whether you're right, left, or center, the law said it was only a kinsman redeemer. And like I said, this could get into a whole other study because it's so strict. One guy in one of the stories was trying to come and save and take care of a problem that had come into the family, but he wasn't the next kinsman. Okay? He had to go to that kinsman. I mean, this is how extreme it gets. And he asked him, are you going to take care of it? And the guy says, well, and he started making excuses, busy, didn't want to, whatever. So by authority, the one that was the closest in kinsman, okay, embarrassed himself publicly. He took off one of his sandals and said, you go. And passed that authority as a kinsman redeemer to the next person. And he had to walk around for a while with one sandal and everybody going, what happened? I couldn't redeem, so I gave that to so-and-so. That's how strict it is. And that's all in the scriptures for the studies of those who are, still, wrestling around with it. And part of this is, yes, we have been dumbed down to live in 3 dimensions. God's in 10 dimensions. That'll wreck most of the people's belief systems in theology anyway, when you start to really understand that. Okay? And this is part of why, like Paul said, I've been to the third heaven. That wasn't a statement of faith. That was an actual fact. Okay? Was he Paul during that whole time? Yes. That points to where we're supposed to be going. The same as Paul. Okay? The 3 disciples that went with Jesus on the mountaintop, and I've used this many times before. And they're walking along with Jesus. Jesus gets up to the top. He starts talking. Moses and Elijah appear, and he starts talking to them. Who died? Nobody. He took them into the kingdom that he knew and was operating in and out of readily, as in others along the way, as in, Paul going to the third heaven, and several other examples. Go chase down a chariot on its way to Ethiopia. How'd the guy do that? He was in the kingdom. Peter gets out of the boat and walks on water. All he did was step into the kingdom where Jesus was. There's no storms in the kingdom. See, as you get over in here, you start seeing that and experiencing that. That was hand puppets back over here. We can't even get out of Egypt until Moses shows up, okay, and let me move on into this, because we can have a whole separate deal on the other of just showing the different places in the scriptures. Therefore, they had souls that were eternal, but so are the bad guys. So eternally, where are you going to spend it? Eternally. Okay? The spirit person died. They were slaves to sin. We'll touch on that, so forth. So the life in the world was just the situation you can go and read about, with them being slaves in Egypt. Now here comes Moses. Moses got them out and crossed the Red Sea. Okay? I'm going to shorten a lot of history to get us, because I want us to understand what the objective on this is. What being a disciple will look like before you get there. Okay? By examples from the scriptures that are talked about it. But like I said, we're going to be focusing on going there. And how do you go there? People go, and it's taught from the front. You get a new message every Sunday or whatever. You get information. Information does not bother the enemy. It's the application of the information. Are you applying it to your life? If you're sitting back and just exchanging information with everybody, what do you think? What do you think with it? The enemy's not going to bother you that much. If he sees that you start moving towards application and stepping out in the authority that you've got, and haven't been taught how to use the application, you're going to start getting his attention. He's only got so many little minions, so many little demons and so forth to bother you. He's not going to waste them on somebody that's already taken themselves away from God by not going towards God, by discussing it until the cows come home, but never applying the rest of it. In other words, you don't get that part? Okay, put it on a shelf. How about the other parts you do get? God's going, well, then if you understand that, why aren't you applying this type thing? Okay, that's just a quick, simple example with it. Okay. I can move through some of this real quick, but I wanted to take, it's a clumsy example, but it's an example. Because he's talking about multidimensionality, and I'll need y'all to come from the kids' table over here.
Late table.
Well, I didn't want to know. And I was saying, we're going to go, and we're going to introduce another land, another grouping, and so forth. We live in 3 dimensions plus time. Height, width, depth, and time. Okay? It'll actually say 4 in the scriptures, but that's another story. Okay? I can't easily show y'all and get to understand. It's usually mathematicians and children that understand anything higher than the dimensions we're in. All right? But I can illustrate it by taking away a dimension in our example. So I'm going to take away height. So this is flat land. The people that are there are flat. Okay? They still have width and depth. Okay? And we always see in one less dimension that exists. Physics. Okay? I can see Dwayne, but if I want to see how deep Dwayne is, I can see how high he is and wide this way. If I want to see his depth, I've got to move around to the side there. He's been good with his weight. And the same is true here in Flatland. Now, if this is us, we're going along and he sees there's other 2 there. Time exists. 1 minute he's here, the next minute he's over there. Okay? If I want to see how thick the guy is, I got to move around here. So everything else in our world operates the same. They go to work, they come home, they get your whole deal. They're just one less dimension. And they get together, and they sing and they do this is just a normal world, but it's flat. All right? But what happens when I do this? For those 2, Fred just disappeared. He didn't disappear to us. There's your cloud of witnesses. You're seeing all this, but you're not in it. You're not flat. You've got all these other dimensions. So then it comes down here. Here comes Fred.
Wow.
Fred appeared among them.
Cool.
From their standpoint, in the upper room, Fred just appeared among them. He didn't walk through a wall. It's not in the scripture. He didn't walk through a wall like they try to say it. No, he appeared among them. He unfolded from a dimension that we have available and just dumbed down to that. Effectively, from God's perspective. Okay? We're made lower than the angels and all these other things start to apply. Now, this is also a way Fred can be closer than our brother. See, brother can only cover this one. It's this dimensionality that's available to us now. Here's the stretch. That's available to us now. That's what Jesus walked in. Was the kingdom and that dimensionality that was there. Okay? So the important aspect, like Moses and Elijah, what was missing in the story from that? Pointing out Jesus was with these 3 disciples. Then, when did Moses and Elijah walk the earth?
Way back. Way back.
Time is irrelevant. They don't have time. You are outside of time. You're outside of time. Not a dimension in the 10. Mathematically, just a footnote, mathematically that's true in the world today. The higher mathematicians have a group of equations called curl equations that the math actually holds up to 10 dimensions. But you got to take time out of an actual mathematical formula and usage. So the physics and everything else holds up and says, yeah, there is, whether we can see it or not and use it, yeah, it is. That was just one of those, but the point being, like with Paul, I've been to the third heaven. He just walked out of the one he's in, okay, through the second where the enemy is, of the air, into the third where God is. Okay? When Jesus was saying, I can only do what I see the Father do and only say what I hear the Father say, that wasn't from memory, past, or faith. That was from him going there in his prayer life. He was pointing out prayerfully, and that's why he took the disciples, let me show you that don't get stuck on this, the thoughts of this is all you can do and all you can be in the only places. Here's Moses and Elijah. And they're there, whoa, dude. You know, you've done all this other stuff, but we weren't looking for that one. Because you were doing this other stuff, casting out demons and everything else, these other people down in our little dimensionality. Those guys weren't there. And he says, well, let me show you. And this is how close they are. Come and see. That was available then. And it's available now. Okay? Examples are happening every day for those who are after him and open to it and walk into it, you know, with it and say, well, I want more of you. This is what got kind of me and Marsha moving along. I'd say there was a book written by a guy named Tommy Tenney called God Chasers. We had been blessed to see several moves of God. Wasn't because we're all that in a bag of chips. It's because we're after him. And wherever he was showing up, well, God's everywhere. Where he was showing up and reaching through those heavenlies and demonstrating to those who are after him what was available to them because they came. Follow me? Because they came. I drugged that poor little girl all over the place. Many times. Places she didn't want to go. But that's another story. But what was available to us, and just we were blessed in the church that we were at. We saw signs, wonders, and miracles on a regular basis. That was normal. Okay? And they were as God allowed them. There wasn't some guy just declaring, oh, this is what we're going to do today. If he wasn't guided by God, no. You know, he wasn't going to see much happen. And we went to Brownsville Revival.